Welcome to the world of science fiction, where you will enjoy latest tales, enjoy the journey. He thought she was just a clone, programmed, synthetic, a stand-in for war councils and diplomatic seduction. But now she was pregnant, and the real queen had arrived, furious, intrigued, and ready to claim what her clone had taken. The orbital cruiser Tempest Strain hovered in synchronous orbit above the gas planet Virexis 9, casting long shadows across its swirling lavender storms. On board, Commander Kyle Roran paced the sterile hall outside the biopod chamber, his pulse matching the distant hum of quantum stabilizers. Inside that room was the last thing he expected from this mission, a future he didn't plan for, and it had silver-white hair and crimson skin, and now carried his child. Clone Queen Thalix 7 had been a diplomatic experiment by the Royal Zenari Court, created to seduce, study, and manipulate human command officers. But Kale hadn't just fallen for her sultry voice and strategic wit. He'd fallen for the vulnerability hidden beneath her DNA-engineered beauty. What neither he nor the Zenari expected was conception. Kale's jaw tightened. Human and Zenari weren't supposed to be genetically compatible, yet here they were. Behind him, the corridor lights dimmed with a rising alert tone. "Commander," intoned the ship 68 Vectoris, "an unauthorized vessel breaches stealth protocols." "Vessel ID confirms. Royal Corecraft Thronepiercer. It is the real Queen Thalix Prime." Kyle cursed under his breath. "Full lockdown. Arm security drones, but don't fire unless fired upon." Vectoris blinked. "Confirmed. Hostile intent. Unknown. However, scans indicate heavy escort. Battle protocols recommended." He turned, already storming toward the hangar bay. The clone was pregnant. The real queen, the original, the source of the template, was inbound. Thalix Prime emerged. From her drop capsule like a crimson tempest wrapped in gold-threaded regalia. Towering, imperious, with a gaze sharp enough to cleave ship steel, she strode through the corridor with two guards flanking her. Kyle met her halfway, chest bare under his field jacket, weapons magnetized at his hips, but untouched. He bowed, half military, half cautious curiosity. "I didn't expect royalty to visit personally," Kyle said. Her voice was like molten silk. "My clone carries your offspring. I come to determine if it lives, and if you deserve the right to continue." Breathing, straightforward. Zenari queens didn't waste time on subtlety. "She's not just a clone anymore," Kyle replied. "She made a choice." "A clone cannot choose," Thalix Prime hissed. "But perhaps I can. The throne must be preserved. And if you've seeded the genetic anomaly that changes everything, then you must be examined too." The throne chamber aboard Thronepiercer was alive with bioluminescent mosses and humming Zenari roots. Thalix Prime circled Kale slowly. She was inspecting him, but also something more. There was a glimmer in her red-gold eyes that wasn't just cold judgment. "You unlocked something in her," she whispered, fingers grazing his cheek. "Compassion, creativity, desire. Qualities we considered unnecessary in a ruler. But perhaps that's what we've missed all along." Kyle stood still, tense but unafraid. "She's more than her programming. So are you. And you, human," she said, voice softening like a blade cooling, "are more than a seed donor." Kyle blinked. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," she purred, stepping close, "if my clone was changed by you, then I want to be too." The walls of the Thronepiercer pulsed with living circuitry, a mix of Zenari biotechnology and ancient star metal. Kyle Roran stood inside the Queen's private chamber, a sanctum few mortals had ever seen, let alone survived. Outside, battle, alarms flickered. Inside, tension thicker than vacuum sealed the air. Queen Thalix Prime leaned close, her crimson skin glistening beneath strands of white-silver hair. Her fingers traced the curve of Kale's jaw as if reading his genetic code by touch alone. She wasn't just a queen. She was a monarch forged by millennia of warfare, cloned tenfold, replicated across galaxies, yet somehow still curious. You impregnated a war construct with a future, she said softly. And now you stand here like a man who does not yet understand what he's done. Kale met her gaze, breathing slow, steady. I don't care if she's a clone or you're the original. She made her own choice. That makes her real. Thalix Prime smiled, a slow, dangerous expression. Then let's test your loyalty. Meanwhile, aboard the Tempest strain, Clone Thalix 7, Kyle's lover, sat inside the birthing chamber. Her belly glowed faintly with the pulsing energy of a growing hybrid. The Zenari fetus inside her wasn't fully Zenari. It carried Kale's DNA and something new, something unpredictable. The Queen has made contact, reported medical AI Meraxis. Likelihood of political conflict has risen to 93%. Recommend extraction of fetus and removal from royal jurisdiction. Thalix 7 curled protectively around her stomach. No, he'll protect us. He always does. The lights flickered. The ship trembled. A transmission screeched to life. Unknown fleet entering system. Multiple heat signatures. Shields raised. Enemy? No traitors. The Vorken, a rival alien species that once warred with the Zenari, had returned. And they'd chosen this moment, this pregnancy, to strike. Back aboard Thronepiercer, battle raged. The Queen led Kale through corridors erupting in red klaxons and hissing plasma. Her guards formed protective formations around them, but she never looked back. Why are they attacking now? Kale shouted over the roar. Thalix Prime didn't miss a step. Because they learned what you've done. They think the hybrid child will shift the balance of power. Kyle blinked. They're right. They are, she agreed. And they'll kill us all before letting that happen. In the bridge, holograms displayed the battlefield. Vorken dreadships engaged Zenari cruisers in a glowing ring of death around Virexis 9. The Tempest strain was already caught in the crossfire, its hull shields flickering under direct fire. Thalix Prime snapped commands to her generals. Deploy Dreadblades to flanking position, signal the sister fleet at Epsilon Belt, and prepare a drop capsule. Kyle stiffened. A drop capsule. She turned. You're going back to her, to the clone, to the child. And when you get there, fight. Hold the line. What about you? She gave him a look that shimmered with sovereign fire. I will win this war, or die making them fear my name for 10,000 years. The drop Kale's descent into the eye. Warzone was fire and fury. The pod screamed through the atmosphere as plasma burst around it. Vorken interceptors tried to track him, but Thalix Prime's cloak field held long enough. He landed hard, metal groaning and sparking, and rolled from the capsule, weapons drawn. Tempest strain was in chaos. The clone, Thalix 7, was holding her own. Defensive shields projected around her chamber, an auto turret mounted above her. Head, Kale burst in, catching her in his arms. You came back, she breathed. I had to, he whispered. You're not just a clone. You're you. They didn't get to say more. The doors blew apart, Vorken warriors pouring in, claws gleaming, guns barking. Kale and Thalix fought back to back, blood and fire dancing around them. Kale's pulse rifle lit the corridor in blue-white death. Thalix 7 used her inner psionics, raw bursts of force that sent invaders flying. She was no longer a diplomatic construct. She was a mother defending her future. But the enemy was endless. Just as Kale's ammo ran dry, the wall behind them shattered, and Queen Thalix Prime strode through the smoke, wreathed in plasma, wielding twin void blades that screamed with antimatter. You thought I would let my bloodline fall? She snarled at the Vorken commander. You know nothing of queens. Together they turned the tide. Thalix Prime led the counterstrike, while Kale and Thalix 7 kept the child safe. The trio, clone, queen, and human, moved like a single mind. The Vorken fell one by one until the ship echoed with the hum of surviving engines and a single pulse of peace. Thalix Prime looked down at Thalix 7's glowing stomach. She has made you strong, she said softly. You are not merely a copy. She's more than that, Kyle said. You both are. The Queen touched his chest. Then I claim my turn. When this war ends, you will give me what you gave her. The child was born beneath the shattered moons of Virexis 9. One scream, and the galaxy shifted. The Tempest strain, though battered, held orbit above the war-scarred planet. Inside its reinforced med-chamber, Thalix 7 clutched the infant to her. Chest, red-skinned, silver-haired, with deep cerulean eyes that blinked open far too soon for a newborn. She's already aware, Kale whispered, kneeling beside them. She's Zenari, Kale, Thalix 7 replied, her voice a mixture of pride and wonder. And yours. Her blood sings with both stars and storms. The Queen arrived not long after. Thalix. Prime entered without guards, wearing ceremonial armor streaked with war soot. She stood over them, not as a monarch, but as something ancient. She watched the child with intensity Kale couldn't read. You named her yet? The Queen asked. Thalix 7 shook her head. I wanted to wait. The Queen's eyes never left the infant. Then allow me. She knelt, laying a glowing sigil onto the child's forehead. Calyx, a fusion of Kale and Zenari, daughter of fire and freedom. Kale's heart thudded. You approve of her. I worship her, the Queen said, rising. But don't mistake reverence for protection. She will be a queen of war. And for that, she must earn her place, days later. A different kind of battle begins with the Vorkan driven off. And Calyx stable, the Tempest strain docked at the Crownforge Citadel, the center of the Zenari Empire. A fortress carved into a dead star's core, it housed the High Council of the Queen's elite. They were not happy. Kyle stood beside Thalix Prime as the 12 counselors circled them, horned and tall, their voices dripping with suspicion. You've created an unstable anomaly, Councillor Veyran hissed. Human DNA mingled with sovereign blood? You've birthed a weapon, not a child. She is mine, the Queen snapped, and she is the future. And what of the other Thalix? Veyran sneered. The clone? You brought a copy of yourself. Into your bed and let it bear your heir. Thalix 7 stood proud, child in arms. I am not a copy. I am who she was before the throne. And I chose Kale not for blood or power, but because he's the only one who saw me. The council murmured. Such defiance was unprecedented. Veyran turned to Kale. And you, human, what do you seek from all this? A crown, a harem of sovereigns. Kale stepped forward. I didn't ask for any of this, but I'll defend them. Both. Thalix's and Calyx, with everything I've got. You want a war with me? Try it. But know this, I already killed for them. I'll do it again. The chamber went silent. Then Thalix Prime laughed, long and loud. Let it be recorded, she said. This man is mine. That night in her chambers of molten glass and gravitic waterfalls, Queen Thalix called Kale to her side. Alone. No council. No guards. Just them. You stood before gods and swore to fight, she said. But fighting isn't enough. You must bind yourself to us. Kyle raised an eyebrow. You mean? A bonding rite, she whispered, stepping close. An old one, not just flesh, soul. It will link us, for life, and it will make our bloodlines one. He looked at her, the firelight casting red shadows on her skin. And what does Thalix 7 think? She insisted. She says the bond makes you ours, not hers, not mine, ours. His heart raced. I accept. The bonding on, the bridge of the ancient. Warship Nexus Solari, beneath a star map etched with every Zenari conquest, the rite was performed. Thalix Prime and Thalix 7 stood on either side of Kale, each placing a hand on his chest. He placed one hand on each of theirs. Energy surged. Symbols ignited across their skin. Their thoughts intertwined. Memories, feelings, fears. And Kale felt both their minds open like galaxies blooming inside his own. He saw Thalix Prime's rise, her wars, her loneliness, her hunger for something real. He saw Thalix Seven's first breath, her rebellion, her choice to love him despite being born for orders. They saw him, a lonely scavenger who became something far more. The bond sealed with light and heat, 3 hearts, now one. But peace was not meant to last on the outskirts of the Empire. A new threat loomed. The Xor Dominion, a collective of parasitic mind fleets, learned of the hybrid child. They saw Calyx not as a queen, but as a signal, a new age, one they must end before it began. Kale awoke to sirens. Enemy signatures, approaching in rift space, cried a voice over the comms. Massive, organic. We're outnumbered, 10-1. The queen rose from bed beside Kyle, her face all fire again. Then we give them hell. A fleet blacker than death tore across the stars, and in its path stood one human, 2 queens, and a child destined to decide the fate of galaxies. The sky above Virexis 9 dimmed beneath a swarm of incoming rift tears. Space itself split open, in luminous wounds, vomiting Xor dreadbeasts into real space, each one a churning amalgam of flesh, metal, and writhing psychic malice, descending in droves. Their target was no longer just a world, it was a bloodline. Inside Crownforge Citadel, command alarms howled and klaxons flashed red. The orbital shields were disintegrating, shredded by the first wave. Marshal Cryon called it in with tight teeth. 10 minutes until breach. Maximum. Kale stood in the command chamber between the 2 Thalix queens, armored now in sacred black steel traced with molten veins of living core stone. The thrum of power between them was so thick it pulled static from the air. Calyx, their daughter, was sealed in the heart sanctum below, protected by every layer of psionic shielding and ancient magic the Empire could summon. But Kale knew the enemy wasn't coming for territory or glory. They were coming for her. We stand, Thalix Prime growled, eyes glowing brighter than ever. Not just for the Empire. We stand for her. Kale flexed his hands, activating the final weapon systems in his wrist plate. They want to take our daughter. Let's make sure they regret trying. The Xor attack began in full. Crownforge's outer walls ignited under bioplasma barrages and venomous spores. Beasts the size of freighters latched onto the ramparts and began disgorging twisted infantry. Flesh met steel, claws met shields. The scent of ozone and blood mingled in the air. Kyle led the first defense squad himself. Zenari warriors flanked him, shoulder to shoulder with human shock troops. Above, Thalix Prime descended like a meteor, spear crackling with searing energy. Thalix 7 carved through the enemy lines, blades wet with ichor spinning in deadly. Synchronicity, push forward, Kyle shouted, ducking under the swipe of a 6-limbed crawler before driving a plasma charge into its exposed neck. Flank left, blast the joints. He barely heard the confirmation before a sonic shriek overwhelmed the battlefield. Xor psions targeted the minds of every defender. Soldiers screamed, clutched their heads, fell in spasms. Even Kale staggered, vision blurring. He heard whispers clawing at his thoughts, trying to split him apart from the inside. They're in our heads, Thalix 7 called out, blood trickling from her nose. Kyle grimaced. Not for long. He slapped a sequence on his gauntlet, activating the prototype neuroharmonic pulse. It was unstable. Might even fry his own brain. But it pulsed outward in a wave of resonant counterfrequencies, clearing minds, burning out psionic interference. The battlefield cleared for a breathless second. Then came the roar. The largest Xor yet, a towering abomination, chitinous and crawling with living mouths, dropped onto the field. It shattered a tower on impact. Its roar silenced even the artillery. Kyle looked up and nearly swore aloud. That's new, the beast charged. Kyle dashed left, dodging tentacles as thick as his torso. He fired point blank into a fleshy joint, drawing its attention. Its psionic spike lashed him in the chest, lifted him off the ground, and threw him back like a rag doll. Everything went white. Kale hit the ground hard, coughing blood, eyes unfocused. Through the haze, he saw the beast turning toward the sanctum. Doors. Toward Calyx. No, he choked. Thalix Prime's scream split the air. Kale! In that moment, just as his breath failed, the bond flared. He felt them both. The queen's. Their minds fused with his. Time stretched. Thought ceased to be separate. And in the sanctum, Calyx stirred. Her cry echoed across reality, pure and primal, laced with the power of her lineage. The very air warped. The Xor reeled as psionic shockwaves burst outward from the child's location. Beasts fell. Some combusted from the inside, screaming. Others froze in horror and turned to flee. Kale gasped, his body surging with strength drawn from the bond. He rose. The queens landed beside him, Prime bloodied but burning with purpose, and Thalix 7, a blur of blades and vengeance. He looked between them. Together, they answered in unison. Together. They pushed forward, slicing through remnants, carving a path into the inner tunnels, deep beneath the citadel, where the psionic breach had first opened. There, tethered to a wall of pulsing neural cords and rotten starlight, waited the Mind Father. Idai was no creature. It was a nightmare. The Mind Father's voice wasn't a sound. It was a presence, drilling into their bones, speaking in a dozen languages at once. Your child is the end. Your union, heresy. Thalix Prime threw her spear. She is hope. Thalix 7 slashed upward, severing the first of the Mind Father's tendrils. Kale dropped to one knee, leveled his cannon, and fired a Sun-Core charge directly into its eye cluster. Pain tore the room apart. Psychic claws lashed out. Reality bent. But the bond protected them, enveloping them in shimmering light. Together, they advanced through pain and fire. They struck in perfect harmony. Spear, blade, plasma. The Mind Father exploded. Silence followed. Not the silence of death, but of freedom. Outside, the last of the Xor shrieked and dissolved into ash. The hive had been severed. The threat was over. Hours later, the sun rose over Virexis 9. Calyx slept, finally at peace. Kael stood with the queens above the crown forge. Gates. Below, people gathered, human and Zenari, warriors and workers, all survivors of a war no one had asked for, but everyone had won. We're not rulers anymore, Thalix Prime said softly. We're guardians. And she's our legacy, Thalix 7 whispered, watching Calyx in her arms. Kyle took both their hands. Then let's build her a galaxy worth inheriting. He looked out at the horizon. The future was unwritten, but for the first time in his life he believed in it. If the stars had a heart, it beat here, where love, war, and destiny became one. If this story stirred something in you, if you crave more wild journeys, galactic romance, and unexpected fathers caught in royal crossfire, send in your next title. The cosmos is waiting. Let's write it together.